Hola, hola everyone, my name is Gabby y bienvenidos a mi YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to deal with test anxiety. I know that this is probably something that we've all experienced at some point, so I'm going to be telling you a story of when I had a really bad experience with test anxiety and how I dealt with it moving forward from that moment. So these are just tips that have helped me get better at coping with test anxiety, and I hope that they help you out too. So this last semester was a little bit challenging for me for many reasons, but one of the reasons was that I was taking a physics class, and this class was probably one of the hardest classes I've ever taken. I don't know why it was so challenging for me to understand physics, but it was, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. So at the beginning of the semester with this class, I was very anxious, very stressed all the time, not only because of the material and not understanding it, but also because of the professor that I had. She made it sound very scary, and she was very particular about how we wrote and formatted our problems and our answers and exams and assignments. And I was just so scared that I was gonna get caught up and do one of her processes wrong and write it the wrong way. And so that, on top of just the challenging material, was working me up, for this first exam. By the time that the exam came, I was just exhausted. I had taken, I believe, an organic chemistry exam like the day before, and I was stressed because of this exam of a class that I do not feel confident in whatsoever. And when I went to take my physics exam, I completely blanked. I could not remember anything that had never happened to me during an exam, and I remember just staring at the clock, just going and moving and looking at the paper and honestly having no idea where to start. And I'm like, I studied so much for this, I stayed up so late, and I can't remember anything right now. So thankfully, I was able to just jot down the formulas and things that I did remember, and I ended up doing okay on that exam. I realized that the professor wasn't as harsh in grading as I thought, thankfully, and that ended up working out for me. But after that, I realized that I had a lot of work to do because I could not continue feeling that anxious for exams in that class, or otherwise I was gonna, continue to blank, and that was just unacceptable. So what I started doing is this. Let's start with the tips now. The first thing is I started working to feel prepared, not perfect. I started studying the material, going through it, going through practice problems, videos that clarified things that I did not understand, and honestly studied to be prepared for the exam and not necessarily know every single little detail of how a problem would work out. I realized that it was better to have a working knowledge of the material that could be applied to different types of problems. So that's the first thing I started doing, is working to be prepared instead of being perfect and understanding every single little part of the material I was, covering. The second thing is to ask for help if you need it. We have tutoring services in the university, and I was actually a tutor. One of my coworkers, he tutored physics, and I was able to get help with him. When you ask for help, not just to tutors, but maybe peers that may understand the material better than you do, you can fill in the knowledge gaps of each other. That helps out a lot. Asking for help, cooperating, working with peers, I think that helps a lot with understanding material. The next thing is to try to see the context outside of this exam, okay? The world is not gonna end if you don't do well in this exam. It's important to keep in mind, and I think that sometimes we forget that this is just a class. It's gonna be okay if you don't do as well as you thought. It just means that next exam you need to put in a little bit more work so that you can start feeling prepared and confident. Go to office hours, meet with the professor, have that one-on-one time. Maybe they can give you tips that they didn't give the rest of the class. And so just, remembering that this is not what qualifies you or disqualifies you from the career that you're pursuing, okay? Context. This is just one class, one exam. It's going to be okay. The next thing that I have written down here is to study with a success mindset. What do I mean by this? Well, I have noticed that when I am in a bad mood, when I'm like, I'm not gonna understand this is too hard, why are they teaching me, there's no point in learning this, I'm never gonna use this except for this class, it's really difficult to study, okay? It's really difficult to study in a way that's gonna be useful to you for the exam, because if you're in this bad mood and dull, oh my gosh, the world is gonna end, this class is awful, I'm not gonna learn anything, then that's how you're gonna do when you're studying. That's the mindset that you're using. You're not gonna be able to process things well. You're not gonna be able to remember things well, understand things well. And I realize that when I'm getting into that headspace, it's time for a break. You know, if I'm starting to feel very, very overwhelmed, I know that I need to take a step back and remember that, no, this is gonna be okay. And I come back when I'm feeling a little better, and sometimes this means the next day, you know, sometimes I do need to take the night off so I can come back to studying this material that is pretty challenging. And I just come to it, I'm like, okay, this is the next step, you know, this is my next exam, we're gonna do it, we've gotten through this before, we're gonna get through it again, it's okay, you're gonna do well, even if you don't get 100% of the exam, you're not gonna fail it. You know, you're a good student, you've been paying attention, you have notes, just go over those, practice as much as you can. You're just telling yourself that it's gonna be okay, you got this is just the next exam. So I think that's really helpful, studying with a success mindset. The next thing is to take care of your physical health, okay? Eat, sleep, and rest. It is so important, you guys. I realized that for that physics exam that I talked about in the beginning of the video, I was just not rested at all. I had not slept, I couldn't think straight, I was just so tired. And I think that a lot of us are affected, whether or not we realize it, by the lack of rest, by the lack of sleep. And honestly, it is better to just go to bed at a reasonable time than to stay up till 2 in the morning studying. Because I realized that a lot of the time where I'm studying that late, I'm not learning anything by that point, you know? It's better to just cut it around like 10:30 and be like, okay, this is as much as I'm gonna learn, and then I'll go back to it in the morning if I have time before the exam. Because if you're just pushing and you sacrifice your sleep over it, it's not gonna look good in the next day. It's worse to do that. You know, it's better to be rested and have a clear mind when you're coming into the exam. So make sure that you eat and that you rest. And the last thing, and this is very, very important, is to recognize that your worth doesn't lie in a letter grade. I think that I struggle with this a lot. I put my worth a lot in my value in the grades that I attain in school. I think that a lot of us do that without necessarily realizing it. You are so smart, you are so capable. If maybe you needed some extra help, that's okay. If you need to take a little bit more time studying, that's okay. Your worth does not depend on this grade in this class. You need to keep in mind that a lot of times in college, a lot of classes have different professors. And sometimes what it takes is to have the same class taught by a different professor in the future. Just because you do not get a good grade on an exam doesn't mean that you're doing a bad job. It doesn't mean that you're failing as a student. And I just want you to remember that you are worth so much more than just a grade on your grade book, okay? I know it matters. I know it may not seem like it in the moment, but you are, and you're gonna be okay. And, you know, do what you can to raise that grade, but don't get too frustrated if you can't, because you're capable, okay? You're capable. You're gonna get through it. And so those are all my tips when it comes to dealing with test anxiety. I know I still struggle with it today, but I do think that keeping those things in mind is very helpful. And I hope that, you know, these tips help you out when it comes to dealing with test anxiety. And if you have any other tips that you think will help other people, please leave them in the comment section down below. I would love to hear them and use them myself as I struggle with this as well. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you stick around, decide to subscribe, like this video if you found it helpful. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.